Station Oros 9 was not a place that scared easily. It had seen war refugees, injured soldiers, and dying creatures from dozens of worlds pass through its medical bays. The staff there were trained for hard situations. They had dealt with emergencies before. But on this particular morning, even the most experienced workers on the station were standing far back from Containment Bay 7, speaking in low voices, and trying very hard not to make any sudden movements. The reason was simple. There was a war dragon inside. His name was Zern, and he was unlike anything most of the station staff had ever seen up close. War dragons were not common. They were not pets, not wildlife, and not something you read about in a standard medical guide. They were weapons, living, breathing, ancient weapons that the Vorith Empire had used in battle for centuries. They were enormous, armored with thick natural plating across their bodies, and capable of producing heat so intense it could melt through standard containment walls if they were angry enough. Zern was very angry. He had arrived on a Vorith military transport ship 3 hours ago, and in those 3 hours he had already destroyed 2 sections of the containment bay, put deep cracks in the reinforced back wall, and sent 3 of the station's best alien healers to the medical ward with serious injuries. The first healer, a narrates specialist with decades of experience, had approached with a standard sedation field. Zern had thrown him across the room before the field even activated. The second healer, a Telani empath trained to calm traumatized creatures through mental connection, had reached out with her abilities and immediately collapsed, overwhelmed by the sheer wall of pain and rage coming from the dragon's mind. The third had not even made it close. Zern had released a burst of heat the moment the bay doors opened, and that healer had been pulled back by station security before anything worse happened. Now the bay doors were sealed. Nobody was going in. Station Director Lita stood at the observation window outside Containment Bay 7 with her arms crossed, staring through the thick reinforced glass at the massive creature inside. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and the kind of calm face that came from years of managing crises. But even she looked tired this morning. She had not slept. She had been dealing with this since the transport ship docked, and the situation was not getting better. Behind her, Commander Saya of the Vorith military stood with 2 of her officers. Saya was the one who had brought Zern here. She was a broad, serious woman in full military uniform, and she had the posture of someone who was used to being in charge of things. Right now, though, even she looked uncomfortable. "Tell me again," Lita said quietly, not turning away from the window. "From the beginning." Saya was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. Zern had been one of the Vorith Empire's most valued war dragons. He had served for years alongside Vorith forces, bonded to a handler, trained and disciplined and controlled. But during a major battle 18 months ago, the transport carrying Zern had been ambushed. The Vorith soldiers guarding him were killed. Zern was captured by enemy forces, a faction known for illegal biological research, and taken to one of their hidden facilities. What they did to him there, Saya explained, was not quick. It was not simple. They had run experiments on him for months. They had used his body to test new weapons, new energy fields, new chemical compounds. They had caused him pain deliberately and repeatedly, studying how a war dragon system responded to different kinds of damage. By the time Vorith rescue forces located the facility and got inside, Zern had been a prisoner for over 7 months. He had been recovered, but he had not come back the same. "He won't let anyone near him," Saya said. "Not Vorith soldiers he has known for years. Not handlers. Not healers. He attacks anything that comes close. We tried everything on the transport ship. Nothing worked." "And his injuries?" Lita asked. "Serious. The wounds from the facility are still not fully healed. Some of them are infected. If they are not treated soon..." Saya stopped. She pressed her lips together. "He is in pain. Every hour makes it worse." Lita finally turned away from the window. She looked at Saya for a long moment, then looked back at Zern through the glass. The dragon was lying in the far corner of the bay, his massive body coiled tight, his eyes open and fixed on the sealed door. Even from this distance, through reinforced glass, she could see the tension in every line of his body. He was not resting. He was waiting. Waiting for the next thing that would hurt him. Lita felt something heavy settle in her chest. She walked back to her office, sat down at her desk and pulled up her communication screen. She went through her contacts, through department lists, through external contractor files. She had already reached out to every specialist on the station's roster. She had already called in 2 outside consultants. None of them had a solution. She needed something different. She needed someone who thought differently. She opened a channel to Earth's Large Creature Medical Division, a small but well-regarded department that handled the treatment of dangerous and traumatized animals, both on Earth and on human colony worlds. She sent a brief message explaining the situation and asking for a recommendation. The reply came back within 40 minutes. One name. Dr. Cole Harmon. Lita read through his file slowly. Cole was 38 years old. He had trained as a veterinarian on Earth and spent the first part of his career working with large and dangerous animals. Big predators, animals with serious trauma histories, creatures that had been abused or kept in bad conditions and no longer trusted people. Then he had moved into off-world work, taking contracts on colony planets where settlers sometimes encountered alien wildlife they were not prepared to handle. He had a long list of cases, animals that other specialists had called unworkable, creatures that sanctuaries had given up on. In almost every case, Cole had found a way through. His methods were not dramatic. There were no special technologies listed in his file, no advanced equipment, no particular technique that stood out. What the file noted over and over again in reports from colleagues and clients was one simple thing. He was patient. He did not rush. He watched and listened before he did anything else. He treated every animal as an individual problem, not a standard case. One report from a colony world on the outer edge of human space described a situation where Cole had spent 4 days sitting outside the enclosure of a severely traumatized predator before he attempted any treatment at all. The animal had been declared dangerous and was scheduled to be put down. Cole had asked for a week. By day 5, the animal was eating from a container he placed near the fence. By day 7, it had led him close enough to begin treatment. Lita sat back in her chair. She looked at the time. She looked at her screen. She looked at the feed from Containment Bay 7, where Zern had not moved from his corner, where his wounds were getting worse every hour, where 3 trained alien healers were in the medical ward. She pressed the call button. Cole answered from what looked like a small office on a colony station. He was a lean man with short brown hair and an ordinary, unhurried face. He looked like someone who had learned a long time ago that there was no point in rushing. Lita explained the situation in full. She told him about Zern, about the experiments, about the failed treatments, about the injuries. She told him what kind of creature a war dragon was. She told him she had no other options. Cole listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a few seconds. "How long do we have before the infections become critical?" he asked. "Our medical team estimates 48 to 72 hours, Lita said. Cole nodded slowly. He looked down at something off-screen for a moment, thinking, not panicking. Then he looked back up. "I'll need to do some reading on war dragons before I arrive," he said. "Diet, natural habitat, sensory range. Whatever biological records you have on the species. I can send all of that to you immediately," Lita said. "Good." He picked up something from his desk. A worn, simple bag. "I'll be there in 14 hours. Lita let out a slow breath. "Dr. Harmon, I want to be honest with you. 3 experienced healers have already been injured. This creature is extremely dangerous." Cole was already standing up, already moving. He glanced back at the screen one last time before the call ended. "I know," he said simply. "I'll see him when I get there." The screen went dark. Lita turned back to the feed from Containment Bay 7. Zern had not moved. His eyes were still fixed on the door. Still waiting. Still braced for more pain. She hoped, quietly, that this human knew what he was doing. Cole arrived at Station Oros 9 14 hours later, just as he had said he would. He came through the docking bay with one bag over his shoulder and a small reader tablet in his hand. He had spent the entire journey going through every biological record Lita had sent him on war dragons. Their natural habitat, their sensory range, how they communicated, how they moved, what they ate, how they healed in the wild. By the time the transport docked, he had read everything twice. Lita met him at the entrance and walked him through the station corridors toward Containment Bay 7. She talked as they walked, giving him updates. Zern's condition had not improved, the infections were spreading slowly, the station's medical team was monitoring from outside but could do nothing more without getting close to the dragon. Cole listened and nodded and did not say very much. When they reached the observation area outside the bay, Lita stopped and gestured toward the reinforced glass window. Cole stepped up and looked through. He stood there for a moment without speaking. Zern was in the far corner, the same position he had been in for hours. The dragon's body was enormous. Even curled tight in the corner, he took up a significant portion of the large bay. His natural armor plating ran across his back and sides, dark and thick, but Cole could already see the damage beneath it. There were areas where the plating had been broken or burned away, leaving raw exposed skin underneath. There were deep cuts along his left flank that had not closed properly. There was discoloration around several wounds that told Cole the infections had already taken hold. But Cole was not looking at the wounds right now. He was looking at Zern's eyes. The dragon was awake. Completely awake. His eyes were fixed on the sealed bay door with an intensity that was hard to look at directly. It was not the wild, unfocused look of a panicked animal. It was something more controlled than that, and somehow that made it worse. Zern was not panicking. He was waiting. He had learned, over 7 months of captivity, that things came through doors and those things caused pain. So he watched the door. He never stopped watching the door. Cole turned away from the window. There was a chair against the wall nearby, a plain station chair that one of the medical staff had been using. Cole picked it up, carried it to the window and set it down directly in front of the glass. Then he sat down, put his bag on the floor beside him, took out his small notebook and opened it on his knee. And then he simply sat there. Several of the alien station staff nearby exchanged looks. A Myra-T technician near the medical console whispered something to the person beside him. A Telani nurse on the far side of the room tilted her head in obvious confusion. Nobody said anything out loud, but the question was clear on every face in the room. What is he doing? Cole was not doing anything that looked like medicine. He was not preparing equipment. He was not reviewing sedation protocols or checking chemical compound levels. He was sitting in a chair with a notebook on his knee, watching a dragon through glass, and occasionally writing something down in small, quiet strokes. Time passed. 10 minutes. Then 30. Then an hour. Cole did not move from the chair. He watched Zern with the same steady, unhurried attention the whole time. He watched how the dragon breathed, noting that the rhythm changed slightly depending on whether there was sound in the corridor outside. He watched how Zern held his body, the way he kept his left side pressed slightly toward the wall, protecting it. He watched the dragon's eyes, the way they moved to track any shift of light or shadow near the bay door, the way they briefly flicked toward the observation window and then away again, not threatened by the glass, just aware of it. Cole wrote all of it down. After about an hour and a half, a nurse came to stand beside him. Her name was Fun, and she was one of the station's more experienced staff, calm, practical, and genuinely curious by nature. She had watched Cole sitting there long enough that her curiosity had finally won over her politeness. "Can I ask what you are doing?" she said. Her voice was polite but direct. Cole did not look away from the window. "I'm learning him," he said. "Before I ask anything of him." Fun looked at Zern through the glass, then back at Cole. "Learning him," she repeated slowly. "Every creature is different," Cole said, still watching the dragon. "Same species, same background, completely different individual. If I go in there without understanding how he specifically moves and reacts, I'm just guessing. Guessing gets people hurt." Fun was quiet for a moment. "The other healers reviewed his biological records before they went in," she said. "I know," Cole said. "That tells you about the species. It doesn't tell you about him." He made a small note in his book. "He guards his left side. Every time he shifts his weight, he moves his right side forward first. That tells me his left flank is where the worst pain is. He already knows that about himself. If I come at him from the left, even accidentally, it will feel like a threat." Fun looked at Zern again with slightly different eyes. "He also relaxes when the corridor outside goes quiet," Cole continued. "Not much, just a slight change in his breathing. But it's there. Noise means activity. Activity means something might come through the door. When it's quiet, the immediate threat feels lower." He paused. "The lights bother him too. Not the brightness exactly, it's the quality. The station lights have a slight flicker at this frequency. I think it matches something from the facility where he was held." Fun stared at him. "You got all of that just from sitting here?" "And reading," Cole said simply. Commander Saya had been standing at the back of the observation area for the past 20 minutes, watching Cole with an expression that was somewhere between impatience and reluctant interest. She walked forward now, stopping a few feet behind Cole's chair. "How much longer do you need to sit there?" she asked. Her voice was not rude, but it was direct. "His condition is getting worse." "I know," Cole said. He closed his notebook and looked at Zern through the glass one more time. Then he looked up at Lita, who was standing nearby. "I need 2 things before I go in. I need the overhead lights in the bay turned down to about half. Not off, just lower. And I need everyone to move back from this observation window and stay completely quiet once I'm inside. No voices, no equipment sounds, nothing." Lita nodded and gave the instruction immediately. The overhead lights inside Containment Bay 7 dimmed slowly. Through the glass, Cole watched Zern's reaction. The dragon's head lifted slightly. His eyes moved around the bay, adjusting. And then, Very slightly, just barely visible if you were watching closely. His breathing changed. The tight, locked rhythm loosened just a fraction. Cole saw it. He stood up from the chair, picked up his bag and slung it over one shoulder. He turned to Fun. "Make sure nobody opens that door once I'm inside," he said quietly. "Not for any reason. Not even if it sounds bad." Fun's eyes widened slightly. "And if it does sound bad?" "Then wait," Cole said. He walked to the bay entrance. The station's security system required a manual override to open it from outside, since it had been sealed after the third healer incident. Lita entered the code herself. The door gave a low, heavy sound as the locks disengaged. Cole did not rush. He did not stride in like someone with a plan to execute. He simply pushed the door open slowly, stepped inside and let it close behind him. The sound of the locks re-engaging was very loud in the silence. Inside the bay, the air was immediately different. Warmer, heavier, carrying the sharp mineral smell of dragon heat and the deeper, darker smell of infected wounds. Cole stood still for a moment just inside the door, not moving, letting his presence register in the room. Zern had moved. The dragon was no longer curled in the corner. He had risen to his full height, and even with the bay being large, he filled a serious portion of it. His head was low, his eyes were locked on Cole, and a sound was building in his chest, low and continuous like something rolling deep underground before an earthquake. Cole did not step back. He also did not step forward. He simply stood where he was, one bag over his shoulder, and looked at Zern with the same calm, steady attention he had been giving him through the glass for the past 2 hours. The growl continued. Cole waited. The growl did not stop. It rolled through the bay like something alive on its own, deep and constant and heavy, filling every corner of the room. Zern had not moved from where he stood. His eyes were fixed on Cole with an intensity that did not waver even for a second. His head was low. His body was coiled with tension. Every line of him said the same thing clearly: "Come closer and this ends badly." Cole did not come closer. He stood exactly where he was, just inside the door, and he did something that made the alien staff watching through the observation glass lean forward without realizing it. He sat down on the floor. Not slowly lowering himself into a defensive crouch. Not carefully placing himself in a position that gave him options if he needed to move fast. He just sat down the way a person sits when they have decided there is no hurry. He pulled his bag off his shoulder, set it on the floor beside him, and leaned his back gently against the wall next to the door. His legs stretched out in front of him. His hands rested open on his knees. He made himself as small and unthreatening as a grown man could make himself. Outside the glass, Finn pressed her hand over her mouth. Commander Saya took one sharp breath. Nobody spoke. They had all been told to stay quiet and they were managing it, but barely. Inside the bay, the growl continued. Cole did not react to it. He looked at Zern, not a hard stare, not the fixed gaze of someone preparing for something. Just a calm, easy look, the way you might look at a fire or a river. Something you were watching because it was there, not because you were afraid of it or planning anything about it. Then he started talking. His voice was low. It was not loud enough to carry far, and it was not meant to. It was the kind of voice you used in a dark room when you did not want to wake anyone. He did not speak in commands. He did not say anything that was meant to instruct or control. He just talked. He talked about Earth. He told Zern about a place in the southern part of the continent where the land was flat and dry and the sky at night had more stars in it than you could ever count. He talked about the animals that lived there, big, stubborn, powerful animals that had been on that land for millions of years before humans arrived. He talked about the smell of the ground after rain, which was unlike anything else in the world, and how the big animals always seemed to know rain was coming hours before any instrument could detect it. He talked slowly. He took his time with each word. There were pauses between sentences that stretched comfortably, the way pauses do when there is no pressure to fill them. The growl very gradually dropped in volume. Not much. Just a little. But Cole heard it. He kept talking. He talked about the first truly dangerous animal he had ever treated alone. A large predator from the northern territories that had been hit by a transport vehicle and left with a broken leg and a deep cut along its back. By the time Cole had found it, it had been lying in the scrubland for 2 days, in serious pain, unable to move properly. It had tried to attack him 3 times in the first hour. Cole had not run. He had simply moved back each time, sat down again and waited. He told Zern that the animal had eventually gotten tired of being afraid. That somewhere in the second hour something had shifted. The animal had stopped trying to attack and had just watched him instead. Cole had taken that as a beginning. As he talked, his hands moved slowly. Not suddenly, not with any urgency, just a gradual, visible, unhurried movement. He reached into his bag and took out the first item. He held it up briefly so it could be seen, then set it on the floor in front of him. A roll of clean bandaging material. He reached in again. A small soft cloth for cleaning. Again. A flat instrument for checking wound depth that had no sharp edges and made no sound. He placed each item on the floor in a loose line, leaving space between them, making sure nothing was hidden. Everything he had was visible. Zern watched every movement. His eyes tracked each item as it came out of the bag. His body was still tense, still ready, but he had not moved forward. The growl had faded now to something lower and less continuous, still present but quieter, like a warning left on rather than a warning being actively given. Then Cole reached into the side pocket of his bag and took out a small sealed container. It was not large, about the size of a closed fist. It had a simple lid. Cole held it for a moment, then opened it slowly. The smell reached Zern before anything else did. The dragon's head came up. His nostrils opened wide. Something changed in his expression, not softening exactly but shifting. The tight, braced look cracked slightly at the edges, like the first thin line in a wall that has been under pressure for a long time. The container held thermal mineral clay, made from a compound Cole had sourced from a volcanic deposit on a moon in the outer system. He had spent 3 hours of the transport journey finding and ordering it from a supply station along the route. It had cost him more than he usually spent on supplies. He had not thought twice about it. War dragons, according to every biological record he had read, came from volcanic regions. In the wild, they used the mineral-rich mud around hot springs and lava pools to soothe injuries. They pressed the clay into wounds. They slept in warm mineral pools when they were hurt. It was their natural way of healing. The scent of that specific mineral combination was not just familiar to them, it was deeply, instinctively connected to the feeling of being safe and being cared for. Cole set the open container on the floor. He pushed it gently forward, not toward Zern, not all the way across the bay, just a short distance ahead of himself into the open space between them. Then he sat back and waited. Zern did not move immediately. He stood and looked at the container. His nostrils continued working, pulling in the scent slowly. His head tilted a fraction to one side, a small movement, almost nothing, but Cole caught it. He had seen that same tilt in animals on Earth. It was the movement of a creature whose body was responding to something familiar even while the mind was still deciding whether to trust it. Cole kept his hands open on his knees. He kept his voice low and steady, still talking, not about anything important, just filling the air with calm sound, the same way you might hum quietly while doing something ordinary, not because the sound meant anything but because silence sometimes felt heavier than it needed to. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then very slowly Zern took one step forward. He stopped. Looked at Cole. Cole did not react. Did not lean forward, did not make a sound, did not change anything about the way he was sitting. He just continued his quiet, unhurried talking, hands open, body still. Zern took another step. Then another. He was not rushing. He was moving the way a careful creature moves when it is not sure yet but is willing to find out. Each step was deliberate. Each pause between steps was long. He kept his eyes on Cole the entire time, watching for any change, any sudden movement, any sign that this was a trick being set up one patient piece at a time. Cole gave him none of those things. By the time Zern had crossed half the distance between them, the growl had stopped completely. The bay was quiet except for Cole's low voice and the soft sound of the dragon's careful steps on the floor. Zern stopped a short distance away. He lowered his head toward the open container of clay. His nostrils moved over it slowly, pulling in the scent from close range now. Then he raised his head and looked at Cole directly, not with aggression, not with the locked, braced stare from before. Just looking. Cole looked back. Calm. Present. Not asking for anything. For a long moment nothing moved. Then Zern turned his body slightly and the left flank, the side he had been guarding since the moment he arrived, the side with the worst wounds, came into the light. Cole looked at it carefully and quietly. He did not reach out yet. He did not move forward. He just looked, taking in everything he could see from where he sat. Then he spoke softly into the small calm on his collar, barely above a whisper. He's showing me the wounds. Stay where you are. Do not make a sound. Outside the glass nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Inside the bay, Cole sat on the floor in the low warm light, and the most dangerous creature on the station stood close enough to touch, and something that had been locked tight for a very long time was very slowly, very carefully beginning to open. Cole did not rush. That was the first thing anyone watching through the observation glass noticed. Even now, with Zern standing close enough to reach, Even with the infected wounds clearly visible and the clock running on the dragon's condition, Cole did not suddenly shift into action. He stayed on the floor. He kept his voice low and steady. He let the moment stay exactly as it was for a little longer, giving Zern time to remain in it without feeling pushed. Only after another few minutes of quiet did Cole slowly reach for the soft cleaning cloth on the floor beside him. He moved his hand the way you move a hand near a fire, carefully, with full awareness of what was nearby, no sudden changes in speed or direction. He picked up the cloth. He held it up briefly, letting Zern see it. It was plain and soft and made no sound. It had been soaked in a mild cleaning solution that Cole had specifically chosen because it had almost no smell. He did not want any unfamiliar scent adding to the input Zern was already processing. Zern watched the cloth. His eyes tracked it without the sharp, locked focus from before. He was still alert. He was still ready to move if something changed. But he was not bracing the way he had been at the start. There was a difference between a creature that was tense and a creature that was terrified, and Cole had spent enough years working with both to know which one he was looking at now. He began to clean the first wound. He worked from the outer edge inward, gentle and slow, talking the whole time in that same low voice. He narrated what he was doing, not for Zern to understand the words, but so that every movement had a sound attached to it before it happened. Touch was coming. Here it is. Moving slightly left now. Stopping. The voice was a signal, steady and consistent, telling the dragon that nothing here would be hidden or sudden. Zern made a low sound when Cole reached a particularly deep section of the wound. It was not a growl. It was shorter than that, more compressed, the sound of something that hurt, acknowledged. Cole paused immediately. Completely still. He waited until Zern's breathing settled again, then continued, working around the worst of it at first, cleaning the edges, letting the area adjust. It was slow work. But Zern did not move away. Cole worked through the first section of wounds carefully, cleaning each one, checking depth, noting which areas needed more attention than surface cleaning could provide. As he worked, he kept part of his attention on something beyond the wounds themselves. He was watching Zern's reactions, not just to touch but to everything around the touch. Every time Cole's hand moved in a certain way, every time a particular sound occurred in the room, he watched what happened in the dragon's body. And he started to notice something. The pain itself, the actual physical sensation of cleaning and pressure on the wounds, made Zern tense but manageable. The dragon held still through it. He made sounds, he shifted his weight, but he stayed. What was different, what was sharper and more immediate were the reactions to certain other things. Cole had brought a small handheld diagnostic tool, a simple device that assessed wound depth using a low-frequency sound pulse. When he turned it on, it produced a faint hum. Just a soft, low electrical hum, barely audible. Zern's entire body changed in an instant. It was not a gradual increase in tension. It was sudden and total. Every muscle locked, his head came up, his breathing went short and fast, and a sound came from deep in his chest that was nothing like the manageable sounds from before. It was the sound of something that had learned, at a very deep level, that a particular thing meant pain was coming. Cole turned the device off immediately. The change in Zern was visible within seconds. The locked tension began to release. The breathing slowed. But it took longer than it should have, longer than the sound itself warranted. Cole set the device down on the floor and did not touch it again. He sat still and let the moment settle completely before he moved at all. He kept working without the device. 20 minutes later, something similar happened again. Cole shifted his bag to reach something inside it, and the metal clip on the outside of the bag knocked against the floor with a small, short sound. A light click, nothing more. Again, Zern's reaction was immediate and disproportionate. The same locked tension. The same fast breathing. The same deep sound from his chest. Cole went completely still. He stayed that way, not moving, not speaking for nearly a full minute, just being present and unmoving while Zern worked through the reaction on his own. When the dragon finally settled again, Cole reached up and quietly unclipped the metal fastening from his bag entirely and set it to one side. He filed everything away in his mind and kept working. By the time he had finished the first full session of cleaning and initial treatment, nearly 2 hours had passed. Cole packed his things slowly, spoke a few last quiet words to Zern, and stood up carefully. He moved to the door without hurrying. Behind him, he heard Zern shift, not aggressively, just the movement of a large creature settling into a slightly different position. Cole stepped out of the bay. The door sealed behind him and the observation area, which had been completely silent for 2 hours, let out a collective breath. Thun looked like she had been holding hers for most of that time. Several other staff members were standing closer to the window than they had been when Cole went in, drawn forward gradually without noticing. Lita was waiting. Commander Saya stood beside her, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Cole set his bag down. He took a slow breath. Then he looked at both of them. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to listen to all of it before you respond." Lita nodded. Saya said nothing, which Cole took as agreement. He told them what he had found. Not the physical wounds first, those he would get to, but the reactions. The hum of the diagnostic tool. The click of the metal clip. He described each incident carefully, the exact nature of Zern's response, the speed of it, the way it bypassed the dragon's conscious state entirely and hit something deeper and more instinctive. "That kind of reaction doesn't come from one bad experience," Cole said. "It comes from repetition. Deliberate, consistent repetition. Something that hums like that equipment, or something that clicks like a restraint locking, was used on him over and over again at the facility. Always followed by pain. Always in a medical context." He paused. "They didn't just hurt him. They trained him to connect the sounds and tools of medical treatment with what was coming next. So when a healer walks in with equipment that hums or clicks or smells like a medical bay, Zern isn't reacting to the healer. He's reacting to what his body has been taught those things mean." The room was quiet. Saya's expression had not changed on the surface. But something behind her eyes had shifted. Cole continued. "Every healer who came in here failed not because they were bad at their job. They failed because they brought the exact things that Zern has been conditioned to fear. The moment they activated their equipment, they weren't healers anymore. They were what he remembered from the facility. His body didn't give him a choice about how to respond." Lita looked through the observation glass at Zern. The dragon had lowered himself to the floor, not fully relaxed but no longer standing at full tension. It was the calmest he had been since arriving. "Then how did you get close to him?" she asked quietly. "I didn't bring anything that made those sounds," Cole said. "I sat on the floor so I was smaller than him. I let him set the pace entirely. I used the clay so there was something familiar and safe in the room before anything else." He looked down briefly. "And I didn't treat him like a problem to be solved. I treated him like someone who had very good reasons for everything he was doing." Saya unfolded her arms. It was a small movement, barely noticeable. But Finn, standing nearby, noticed it. In all the times Saya had been on this station, she had not seen the commander's posture change once. "You are saying," Saya said slowly, "that the fault was not with Zern." "It was never with Zern," Cole said simply. Saya looked through the glass. For a moment she said nothing at all. When she spoke again, her voice was slightly quieter than before. "None of our specialists reached that conclusion," she said. It was not a question. It was not quite an admission either. It was something in between, the sound of someone who was very used to having answers discovering that a question had been asked they had not thought to ask. Cole picked up his bag. "I'd like to go back in tomorrow morning," he said. "Early, before the station gets busy and the noise levels rise. I'll need the same conditions. Low lights, no staff near the window, no equipment sounds from the corridor." Lita nodded immediately. Cole looked at Zern one last time through the glass. The dragon's eyes were half closed. His breathing was slow. The wounds still needed serious work. There were days of careful treatment ahead before the infections would be under control. But Zern was on the floor. He was still. And for the first time since he had arrived at Station Oros 9, he was not watching the door. Cole turned and walked quietly down the corridor. Behind the glass, Zern slept. 3 days passed. Then 4. Then 5. Each morning Cole arrived at Containment Bay 7 before the station got busy, before the corridors filled with staff and the noise levels climbed. He came at the same time every day. He walked the same route. He did not vary it because consistency was not a small thing, it was everything. Creatures that had been through trauma did not trust the unpredictable. They trusted the repeated. The same footsteps at the same time, coming down the same corridor, meant the same thing every day. And the same thing, when it was safe, eventually became something to expect instead of something to fear. By the third morning something had changed. Cole was still 20 meters from the bay door when he heard it, a low sound from inside, not a growl, something different. Shorter. Almost like a single note. Fun was walking beside him that morning, carrying a tray of supplies, and she stopped when she heard it. "What is that?" she said quietly. Cole kept walking. "He hears me coming," he said. Fun looked at him. Then she looked at the sealed bay door ahead of them. "He recognizes your footsteps?" "Started yesterday," Cole said. "I wasn't sure the first time. Now I am." They reached the door. Through the small monitoring panel beside it they could see the interior feed. Zern was on his feet facing the door. Not in the locked, braced stance from his first days, not the wide, low posture of a creature preparing to fight. He was simply standing, facing the door, head at a natural height. Waiting. Finn stared at the monitor for a long moment without speaking. Cole entered the bay. The sessions over those days had built on each other the way careful things build. Slowly, without drama, each one adding something small to what the one before had established. Cole had worked through the wounds section by section, always narrating, always giving Zern time between each new thing. He had removed 3 embedded metal fragments from the worst area of the left flank over 2 sessions, working with instruments that made no sound and moved with complete deliberateness. Each time he needed to do something that he knew would cause pain, he paused first, spoke quietly, and waited for Zern's breathing to settle before he touched anything. Zern had held still through all of it. Not easily, not without cost. Cole could see what it took from the dragon to stay present through those moments, the enormous effort of choosing to remain when every trained instinct was screaming to react. But he stayed. Every time. And each time he stayed, Cole made sure the thing that followed was worth it. After a difficult moment, he would stop working entirely and just sit. Sometimes he brought a small amount of the mineral clay and worked it gently into the edges of a healing wound the way the biological records described war dragons doing for each other in the wild. Those moments always brought the same response from Zern, a gradual lowering of the head, a slowing of the breath, the particular stillness of a creature that is, for a short time, not braced against anything. The infections were responding to treatment. The deep wounds were closing. The burn scarring along the nerve clusters would take longer and would likely never fully resolve, but the acute danger had passed within the first 48 hours of real treatment. Physically, Zern was improving steadily. But what Cole was watching more carefully now was not the wounds. It was everything else. Zern had started eating again. The station had sourced appropriate food based on Cole's recommendations. Large quantities of mineral-rich protein that matched what war dragons hunted in their natural habitat. For the first 3 days Zern had ignored everything placed in the bay. On the 4th day he had eaten half of what was left for him. On the 5th all of it. On the 6th morning when Cole arrived, the tray from the previous evening was clean and Zern was watching the door with something in his expression that was new. Cole had spent enough years with animals to recognize hunger that was uncomplicated. Hunger without fear attached to it. Hunger that simply meant, I am alive and I want to eat. It was a small thing. Meant a great deal. On the 6th evening, Cole requested a meeting with Director Lita and Commander Saya. They gathered in the small briefing room near the medical wing, the same room where Cole had laid out his findings about Zern's conditioned fear responses 5 days earlier. Lita sat at the table. Saya stood near the window, which was her habit. Cole sat across from Lita and put his notebook on the table. He gave them a full update on the physical recovery first. Wound status, infection levels, projected healing timeline, recommended ongoing care. Lita listened and made notes. Saya listened without moving. Then Cole stopped. He looked down at his notebook for a moment. Then he looked up. I need to say something about what happens after the physical recovery is complete, he said. And I want to be direct about it because I think anything less than direct would be doing Zern a serious harm. Lita set her pen down. Saya turned slightly from the window. Cole spoke plainly. He told them that Zern was healing. That the wounds were closing and the infections were clearing and in another week the acute medical situation would be resolved. But physical healing and full recovery were not the same thing. What had been done to Zern at that facility, the months of deliberate conditioning, the systematic destruction of his ability to trust, that was not something that closed up like a wound. It went deeper than the body. It lived in the part of a creature that decided, at a level below thought, whether the world was safe or dangerous. Zern was making progress with that. Real progress. Cole had seen it every day. But progress was not the same as finished, and finished was not something that had a date attached to it. If Zern is returned to military service, Cole said, everything we have built in these sessions will be undone. Not gradually. Quickly. Military conditions, the noise, the equipment, the unpredictability, the confinement during transport, all of it will retrigger what was done to him at the facility. The sounds alone will be enough. He will go back to what he was when he arrived here, but it will be harder to reach him the second time. Possibly much harder. The room was quiet. Saya's voice, when she spoke, was measured and careful. Zern represents a significant investment by the Vorith military, she said. He is the last of his bonded line. The War Dragon program is. I understand that, Cole said. He did not say it with sharpness or impatience. He said it the same way he said everything, quietly, clearly, without room for misunderstanding. And I'm not telling you what decision to make. That's not my place. I'm telling you what the medical reality is so that whatever decision is made, it's made with full information. He paused. Zern held still while I removed metal fragments from his body, Cole said. He did that because he chose to trust something for the first time in over a year, against everything his experience had taught him. That is not a small thing. That is the hardest thing a living creature can do after what he went through. Cole looked at Saya directly. Sending him back into the conditions that broke him would answer that trust in a very specific way. Saya said nothing. The meeting ended shortly after. Lita walked Cole back toward the medical wing, and they parted at the corridor junction without many words. Cole went to check on Zern one last time before the evening. Saya did not return to her quarters. She walked to the observation window outside Containment Bay 7 and stood there alone. The lights inside were low the way Cole kept them. Zern was on the floor near the center of the bay, not pressed into a corner, not coiled tight against the wall. He was lying in the open, his great head resting on the floor, his eyes closed. His breathing was slow and even. The tension that had lived in every line of him since his arrival, that constant, exhausting readiness for the next bad thing, was not there. He was simply asleep. Saya stood at the window for a long time. She had known Zern for years from a distance, the way military commanders know the assets under their authority. She had known him as a presence, as a capability, as a number in a readiness report. She had never stood and watched him sleep before. She had never had a reason to. She stood there until the corridor behind her was empty and quiet. Then she walked to her office, sat down at her desk, and opened a secure communication channel. The connection took several minutes to establish. It was a long-range link, routed through 2 relay stations to reach its destination. When it connected, the emblem of the Vorath High Council appeared on her screen. Saya straightened in her chair. I need to submit a formal request for a status review, she said. Regarding War Dragon designation Zern. I am recommending a change in classification. She did not look uncertain when she said it. She looked like someone who had made a decision that was difficult and right, which was, in the end, the only kind of decision worth making. The response from the Vorath High Council came on the 9th day. Saya received it early in the morning before most of the station was awake. She read it twice, standing at her desk in the quiet of her office, and then she sat down and read it a 3rd time. The message was formal and precise, the way all High Council communications were. It acknowledged her request. It referenced Zern's service record. It noted the medical reports Cole had submitted, which Saya had attached to her recommendation without asking his permission, because they said everything that needed to be said better than she could have said it herself. The Council's decision was still under final review, the message said. A ruling would come within 48 hours. Saya set the message down and looked at the wall for a moment. Then she got up and went to tell Cole. She found him already at the bay, arriving at his usual time, walking the same corridor he had walked every morning for 9 days. He was carrying his bag on one shoulder and a fresh container of mineral clay in his other hand. He looked the same as he always did, unhurried, quiet, present. Saya fell into step beside him. She told him about the message. Cole listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once. How long until the final answer? He asked. 48 hours, Saya said. Cole considered that for a moment. That lines up well, he said. Physically, Zern is close to where I need him to be. The main wounds have closed. The infection is gone. The deeper tissue is still healing but it's stable. He paused. Today will be our last formal treatment session. Saya looked at him. And after that? After that he needs consistent care and time, Cole said. Whoever takes over his ongoing treatment will need a full briefing from me. I'll write everything up. What works, what to avoid, the sounds to keep away from him, the approach to use. He glanced at her briefly. The person who does it doesn't need to be a specialist. They just need to be patient and willing to learn him. They reached the observation area. Through the glass, Zern was already on his feet, facing the door. Saya stopped walking and looked at the dragon for a moment. 9 days ago that posture, standing facing the door, had meant something dangerous. Now it meant something completely different. The body was the same. The meaning had changed entirely. She watched Cole push open the bay door and step inside. Inside the bay, Cole set his bag down and sat on the floor the way he always did. Not because Zern still needed him to make himself small, that had stopped being necessary several days ago. He sat on the floor because it was what he had always done in this room, and consistency was still worth protecting even when it was no longer strictly required. Some things you kept doing not because they were needed anymore but because they were part of the language the two of you had built together, and changing them without reason was its own kind of small disruption. Zern lowered himself to the floor close by. That was still something to notice. In the early days, close had meant the distance a creature maintains when it is willing to tolerate your presence. Now close meant something chosen. Zern settled himself at a distance that was comfortable, tucked his front legs under his chest, and looked at Cole with the relaxed, half-lidded attention of a creature that was not on guard. Cole worked through the final checks slowly and carefully. He examined each of the healing wounds in turn, cleaned the areas that still needed it, applied a last treatment of the mineral clay compound to the deepest scar tissue along the left flank. He narrated as he always did, low and even, though the narration had changed over the days. At the beginning it had been purely functional, telling Zern what was happening before it happened, so nothing was a surprise. Now it had become something more like conversation. Cole talked about what he was seeing, what it told him, what it meant for how the healing was progressing. He did not know how much Zern understood. He spoke as though it mattered. When the last treatment was done, Cole sat back and looked at Zern for a long moment. He thought about what to say and then decided to say exactly what was true. He told Zern that this was the last session. That the medical work was finished. That other people would come to care for him from now on, and that they would be good people, patient people, people Cole would make sure understood what Zern needed before they ever set foot in this bay. He told Zern that the place he was going, if the council's decision came back the way Seiya expected it to, would be quiet and warm and would have the kind of ground under it that war dragons came from. Volcanic soil. Mineral water. Space to move. He told him that what he had done over these 9 days, the choosing to stay, the choosing to trust against everything that had been done to him, was not a small thing. That it had taken more than most creatures had in them. That it had taken more than most people had in them. Cole was not someone who talked easily about things like that. But he said it because it was true and because Zern had earned the right to hear it, even if the words themselves meant nothing and only the tone carried through. He stopped talking. The bay was quiet. Cole put his hands on his knees and looked at Zern one last time, at the great scarred body, at the wounds that were now closing, at the face that no longer watched the door with dread. Then he pressed his hand gently against the side of Zern's jaw, the way he had done at the end of sessions for the past several days. A simple thing. A consistent thing. A small signal that meant, we are done for now and it was all right. He stood up. He picked up his bag. He took one step toward the door. And then Zern moved. Not fast. Not with urgency. The dragon simply lifted his enormous head from the floor and leaned it forward, slowly and deliberately, until it came to rest against Cole's shoulder. The weight of it was significant. The head of a war dragon was not a light thing, and Cole went completely still under it. He did not step away. He did not reach up dramatically or make any large movement. He just stood there, bag in hand, one step from the door, with the head of an ancient creature resting against him. Outside the observation glass, the corridor had gathered more people than Cole knew about. Word had spread over 9 days the way things spread on small stations. Quietly, person to person, without announcements. Staff from other sections had been finding reasons to walk past the observation window at the times Cole's sessions were scheduled. They came from the engineering wing, from the supply bay, from the docking section. They did not know exactly what they were coming to see. They came because something was happening that they did not have a word for yet and they wanted to be near it. There were 14 people at the glass when Zern lowered his head onto Cole's shoulder. Not one of them made a sound. Fun was standing close to the window, close enough that her breath fogged the glass slightly. She had been present for every session. She had watched the whole 9 days from outside, had brought supplies, had kept the corridor clear, had stood quietly at the edge of things and watched a human she did not fully understand do something she could not fully explain. She stood there now with her hand pressed flat against the glass and said nothing for a long moment. Then she turned to Lita, who was standing just behind her. He walked in with almost nothing, Finn said quietly. Her voice was not loud. It was the voice of someone working something out as they said it. No restraints. No sedation fields. No mental suppressors. Just a bag. She looked back through the glass. How did he do what none of us could do? Lita was quiet for a moment. She watched Cole standing still inside the bay, the great dragon's head resting on his shoulder, the low light falling across both of them. She thought about the chair pulled up outside the glass on the first day. She thought about Cole sitting on the floor. She thought about the clay and the slow voice and the hours of nothing that had turned into something. He didn't try to overpower him, Lita said softly. He just made him feel safe. Fun looked at her. Then she looked back through the glass and did not say anything else, because there was nothing else to say. The council's answer came the following morning. Seiya brought it to Cole herself. She found him in the small room he had been using near the medical wing, writing up the full care document he had promised. 12 pages of detailed notes on Zern, his responses, his needs, his progress, the approach that worked and the things to avoid. Cole looked up when she entered. Saya told him the decision. The Vorath High Council had approved the change in classification. Zern was to be formally retired from military service. He would be transferred to a protected sanctuary reserve on a volcanic moon in the outer system. A place with warm mineral pools and open ground and no weapons program, no transport schedules, no handlers with military objectives. He would be the first war dragon in the history of the Vorath Empire to be given that status. Cole listened to all of it. When Saya finished, he looked down at his document for a moment, then back up at her. Saya had spent 9 days on this station watching this human work. She had come in dismissive and she knew it. She had stood at the back of rooms and waited for him to fail, and he had not failed. She had submitted a recommendation to the highest military authority of her empire based on the word of a man who treated animals, and the recommendation had been accepted, and she found that she was not surprised that it had been. She told him that. Not all of it, she was Vorath and directness had its limits, but enough. She told him that what he had done in that bay was not something her military's best specialists had been able to do. That the station would not forget it. That she would not forget it. Cole stood up from the table. He closed his notebook. He picked up his bag from the floor and slung it over one shoulder. He looked at Saya with that same quiet, unhurried expression he had carried through every moment of the past 9 days. "I just treated the patient," he said. He walked out into the corridor. Behind him, through the walls of the station, somewhere in the warm low light of Containment Bay 7, Zern was sleeping, deeply, quietly, without watching the door. For the first time in over a year there was nothing to watch for. He was simply at rest.